10 vegetables. Plant them once, this season, and you'll be harvesting food from that same container for years, sometimes decades, without ever replanting. That's not a gardening fantasy. That's exactly what the 10 crops in this video do. Here's what most container gardeners never figure out. They're stuck in a loop. Every spring, they buy new seeds, new soil, new starter plugs. They replant everything from scratch. They spend hundreds of dollars and dozens of hours resetting a garden that never actually builds on itself. The gardeners who break out of that loop, the ones growing food on balconies and patios year after year without starting over, they're growing perennials. Permanent underground root systems that survive winter, regenerate every spring, and produce more food with every passing season. One crop on this list has a productive lifespan of 15 to 20 years in a single container. Another one you can start from cutting off a grocery store bunch and harvest within 30 days. And one of them, this one surprises almost everyone, actually gets sweeter after winter frost hits it underground. We're covering all 10 today. Stay with me, because the last crop on this list is the one most people have never heard of, and it might be the most productive green vegetable you've never grown. Before we get into the crops, I want to give you one comparison that reframes the entire concept of container gardening. A gardener running a standard 10-pot annual setup, tomatoes, peppers, squash, the usual, can easily spend several $100s over 10 years replacing seeds every spring, refreshing depleted soil, buying fertilizer and starter plugs, on top of the labor of resetting the garden each season. A 10-container perennial system covering that same space can cost a fraction of that over the same decade. Same pots, same patio space, dramatically less ongoing spend, and far fewer hours of maintenance. Here's the structural reason why that gap exists. Annual vegetables complete their entire life cycle in one season. When they're done, they're done. You pull them, you reset, you start over. Perennial vegetables work completely differently. They build permanent underground structures, fleshy taproots, rhizomes, crown systems, bulb networks. These structures store carbohydrates through winter dormancy and fuel explosive regeneration every spring. The plant you put in the ground this year is a stronger, more productive plant next year. And the year after that. That's the system we're building today. Container gardening has exploded in popularity in recent years. Patio pots, window boxes, raised planters, and a big part of that growth is coming from renters and small space gardeners looking for systems that actually build value over time instead of resetting every April. Perennial container gardening is exactly that system. Let's get into the 10 crops that make it work. Crop number 1, the Egyptian walking onion. We're starting with a plant that moves on its own, literally walks across your garden. The Egyptian walking onion doesn't produce traditional seeds. Instead, it grows clusters of aerial bulblets, called top sets, right at the top of its hollow stems. As those top sets mature and get heavier, the stalk bends under the weight, touches the ground, and the bulblets root wherever they land. The plant physically walks itself to new ground every season. In a container, that walking behavior is contained, and what you're left with is one of the most productive, lowest maintenance alliums you can grow. This is a hybrid between a common onion and a Welsh onion. It's cold hardy down to -24 degrees Fahrenheit, USDA zones 3 through 10, which means almost every gardener in the continental United States can grow this outdoors year-round. And once established, it produces indefinitely through self-propagation, with individual plantings known to keep producing for over a decade. Here's what you harvest. Green shoots year-round on a cut-and-come-again basis. The aerial bulblets and underground multiplier bulbs from June through August. Container requirement: minimum 3 to 5 gallons, at least 12 inches deep. This depth is a strict structural requirement. Anything shallower limits winter hardiness and bulb size. One critical substrate note: avoid standard peat-based mixes for this crop. Peat shrinks and dries to a hydrophobic state over multiple seasons. You need a structured, loam-based potting mix that holds moisture and nutrients across years of continuous cultivation. Annual maintenance: one top dressing of well-rotted compost every spring. That's it. The primary failure mode is bulb rot from waterlogged soil. Water deeply, let it drain, and this plant essentially takes care of itself. Crop number 2, Perennial Arugula. Most gardeners know arugula as that peppery salad green that bolts in summer and dies. You plant it in spring, enjoy it for 6 weeks, and pull it when it goes bitter and flowers. Perennial Arugula, wild rocket, is a completely different plant. Botanically distinct from annual arugula, wild rocket has deeply lobed, narrow leaves, and a flavor profile that's significantly more intense and pungent than anything you've grown from an annual seed packet. It grows continuously from early spring until the first hard winter freeze, comes back every year from its established taproot, and thrives for 2 to 5 years before it needs replacing. Here's the detail that makes this exceptional for small space container growing. It thrives in a 1 to 2 gallon container, 8 to 10 inches deep and wide. That's small enough for a narrow apartment windowsill, small enough for the edge of a fire escape planter. It doesn't need rich soil. It actually prefers sandy, low fertility, sharp draining substrates with about 20% perlite mixed in. Standard potting mix amended with perlite is ideal. It's drought tolerant once the taproot establishes. It's disease resistant. And it self-seeds readily, meaning when the parent plant eventually declines after 3 to 5 years, you already have the next generation growing nearby. This is a crop that commands premium prices at specialty markets, and it fits in a 1-gallon pot and comes back every year. One management note: prune the yellow flowers as soon as they appear. Letting the plant set seed redirects energy away from leaf production and shortens your harvest window. Those first 2 crops are compact, low maintenance, and fit almost any space. But the next plant on this list is the opposite in every way. It can grow 6 to 10 feet tall, lives for up to a decade in a single container, and produces leafy greens every single month of the year. And most American gardeners have never heard of it. Crop number 3, purple tree collards. A thick, woody central stem. A plant that looks less like a vegetable and more like a small tree. That's purple tree collards, and it's about to change how you think about leafy greens. Standard collards and kale are annuals or biennials. You plant them, harvest through 1 season, and they're done. Purple tree collards are a perennial brassica that develops that woody stem and produces dense, sweet, slightly nutty leaves continuously for 5 to 10 years. The leaves turn deep purple during cool weather. They're harvestable every single month of the year by plucking from the bottom of the stem upward. A single well-established plant in a container can yield roughly 8 to 15 pounds of fresh leaves annually. Now here's where the management gets specific, because this crop has some requirements that matter. First, the container. Minimum 7 to 10 gallons, 18 inches deep. The plant can reach 6 to 10 feet in height. So in a container, you prune it to a compact 4-foot structure and stake it to a central wooden or metal support. Without staking, wind toppling is the primary failure point. Second, calcium. Brassicas are heavy calcium consumers. Purple tree collards need an annual calcium supplement, ground oyster shells or agricultural lime worked into the root zone, to prevent leaf margin chlorosis and maintain optimal flavor. Most container gardeners skip this step and wonder why their plants decline in year 3. Third, zone consideration. This crop is hardy in zones 8 through 10 outdoors. In colder zones, zones 7 and below, it must be grown in a container specifically so it can be moved indoors or into a greenhouse for winter protection. The container isn't a compromise here. It's the enabling condition. Repot every 1 to 2 years to refresh the soil and prune circling roots. Manage aphids, cabbage loopers, and whiteflies with insecticidal soap or a hard stream of water. 5 to 10 years of monthly harvests. 1 plant, 1 container. Crop number 4, French sorrel. Bright, citrusy, lemony, without a single drop of lemon juice added. That's French sorrel, a crop most American home gardeners have never grown, and almost every chef knows by name. It's a low-growing, creeping herbaceous perennial in the buckwheat family, native to mountainous regions of southern Europe. The leaves are arrow-shaped, bright green, and deliver that citrus-like flavor thanks to moderate levels of oxalic acid in the leaf tissue. Think of it as a salad green that tastes like it's already been dressed. Cold hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit across USDA zones 4 through 9. Drought tolerant once established due to its alpine origins. And compact enough to thrive in a 2 to 3 gallon container, 10 to 12 inches deep and wide. Harvest begins within 60 days of planting. Using a cut-and-come-again method, you harvest outer leaves weekly from early spring through late autumn. Annual yield, roughly 1 to 2 pounds of fresh greens per plant. Productive lifespan, 4 to 8 years. 2 management rules that determine success or failure with this crop. First, remove flower stalks immediately as they appear. If the plant is allowed to flower, the foliage becomes tough and bitter. Stay ahead of it, and the leaves remain tender and flavorful all season. Second, divide the clump every 3 to 4 years. Without division, the crown becomes overcrowded, productivity drops, and the plant begins to decline. Divided sections can be replanted into separate containers, expanding your production for free. Slugs are the primary pest threat on young spring rosettes. Protect new growth in early spring, and the rest of the season takes care of itself. French sorrel is a compact, elegant crop. The next one is the complete opposite. It's one of the most architecturally dramatic plants in this entire list. It took centuries of British history to develop as a cultivated food crop, and it produces a harvest so specialized that most gardeners don't even know this vegetable exists. And it lives in a single container for up to 15 years. Crop number 5. Sea kale. Picture this. In late winter, you place an upturned bucket over a dormant plant crown. No light gets in. Weeks later, you lift the bucket and find pale, tender shoots that taste nothing like anything else in the garden. That's the entire appeal of sea kale in one image. Native to the gravelly Atlantic and Baltic coastlines of Great Britain and Northern Europe, sea kale has been cultivated for centuries for exactly this technique: tender, blanched spring shoots. The mature plant produces large, wavy, silver-blue leaves that resemble collards, topped in midsummer by massive clouds of honey-scented white flowers. It undergoes complete winter dormancy, dies back to the ground entirely, and re-emerges every spring with increasing vigor. Hardy in USDA zones 5 through 9. Productive lifespan in a container, 10 to 15 years. To harvest the prized shoots, place a forcing pot, a bucket, or a specialized terracotta cloche directly over the dormant crown in late winter, February or March. The cover excludes all light. The shoots emerge in complete darkness, pale and tender, and are harvested when they reach 8 inches in length. These blanched shoots are the edible prize, sweet, tender, and completely different in character from the unblanched summer leaves. Critical rule: no harvest during the first 2 growing seasons. The plant needs those 2 years to build root energy reserves. Try to harvest in year 1, and you'll weaken the crown permanently. Wait until year 3, and you'll have a plant that feeds you for over a decade. Container requirement: 10 to 15 gallons, 18 to 20 inches deep. This is a large-rooted crop. It develops a substantial fleshy taproot that needs space. The substrate must be highly aerated and fast-draining, mimicking its native shingle beach habitat. Mix loam-based potting soil with 30 to 40% coarse builders, sand, or agricultural grit by volume. Soil pH should sit between 7.0 and 8.0. Add agricultural lime to maintain alkalinity. The patient's investment at the start pays back for 15 years. That's the sea kale proposition. Crop number 6. Watercress. This is the crop on the list you can start for almost nothing and be harvesting within 30 days. Here's how. Buy a bunch of fresh watercress from your grocery store. Put the stems in a glass of water on your windowsill. Within 5 to 7 days, those stems will develop roots. Transfer them to a container, and you have a producing watercress plant started from a couple of dollars worth of grocery store greens. Watercress is a semi-aquatic perennial native to Europe and Asia, naturally thriving in clean, cold, slow-moving water. It's one of the most nutrient-dense greens you can grow, exceptionally rich in vitamins A, C, and K, cold-tolerant across USDA zones 3 through 11. The container setup for watercress is unlike anything else on this list. You want a wide, shallow container, minimum 12 to 16 inches in diameter, but only 6 to 8 inches deep. Deep pots work against this crop, and the critical management factor is water movement. The container must sit inside a deep tray or saucer filled with 1 to 2 inches of fresh, clean water. That water must be drained and replaced daily. Not weekly, daily. This is non-negotiable. Stagnant water deprives the roots of oxygen, creates conditions for root rot, and can breed mosquitoes. The daily water change mimics the flowing water of watercress's natural habitat and keeps the root zone oxygenated and healthy. Harvest by cutting stems back to 4 inches from the base. The plant regenerates rapidly, producing a continuous yield of roughly 3 to 5 pounds of fresh greens per harvest cycle through spring and autumn. Productive lifespan of 2 to 3 years before replacement from cuttings is recommended, which means that small starting investment keeps producing for years. Quick question before we move on. Out of the crops we've covered so far, which one are you most tempted to plant once and harvest for years to come? Drop it in the comments. I read every one of them. Alright, the next 2 crops are the opposite of what we just covered. They're the heavy hitters. Underground producers that generate serious yields of edible tubers and roots rather than leafy greens. And one of them has a biological quirk that makes winter frost improve the flavor of your harvest rather than damage it. Crop number 7. Jerusalem artichoke, also called sunchokes. Jerusalem artichokes, also called sunchokes, are one of the most productive edible crops native to North America. They're in the sunflower family. They grow 8 to 12 feet tall, and they produce underground tubers with a crisp, water chestnut-like texture. Here's the biological detail that surprises most people. Sunchokes contain inulin, a prebiotic fiber that doesn't spike blood glucose the way starchy tubers normally do. That makes them one of the few genuinely diabetic-friendly starchy vegetables. And those tubers actually become sweeter after experiencing winter-ground frosts, as cold temperatures convert stored inulin into more digestible sugars. Container growing isn't just possible for this crop, it's actively recommended by horticultural extensions. In the ground, sunchokes are highly aggressive spreaders. They send lateral rhizomes outward in every direction, colonizing everything around them, to the point of being functionally invasive in a garden bed. In a container, you control them completely while still capturing their full productivity. Container requirement: 10 to 15 gallons, 16 to 18 inches deep, per 2 to 3 planted tuber pieces. Because these plants reach 8 to 12 feet tall, stake the stems or bury the bottom third of the pot in the ground for ballast. Otherwise, summer wind will topple the entire setup. Annual yield: roughly 3 to 5 pounds of tubers per container. Harvest begins in late October after the foliage dies back completely. Here's the management rule that determines whether this crop stays productive indefinitely or collapses. Every year at harvest, dump the container, collect the tubers, and replant 1 to 2 small tuber pieces with active growth eyes for next season. Skip this thinning step, leave everything crowded in the pot, and yields can collapse dramatically the following year, producing tiny, unmarketable thread-like roots. Harvest, thin, replant. Every year. Do that, and this crop produces indefinitely. Crop number 8. Horseradish. Almost every American has eaten horseradish, in a sauce, a condiment, a prepared dish. Almost none have grown it themselves. That gap is worth closing. This is a deep-rooting perennial in the mustard family, native to Eastern Europe and Western Russia. The white taproot releases allyl isothiocyanate when grated. That's the compound responsible for the intense sinus-clearing heat that makes horseradish distinctive. It's extremely hardy across USDA zones 2 through 9 and requires a cold winter dormancy period to develop optimal root flavor compounds. The cold isn't a challenge for this crop. It's a requirement. Like sunchokes, horseradish should always be grown in a container for garden management reasons. Its lateral root system is highly invasive in open ground. A deep pot of 10 to 20 gallons, 18 to 24 inches deep, is required. Fabric grow bags work excellently here. They prevent roots from circling and escaping through drainage holes. The technique that separates mediocre horseradish from exceptional horseradish is called lifting and stripping. When the foliage reaches about 1 foot tall, you carefully pull back the soil from the upper root crown and rub off all the small lateral roots and secondary shoots, leaving only the bottom roots undisturbed. This forces the plant's energy into a single, large, straight taproot rather than a branching, woody, divided root mass. Roots make their greatest growth during cool autumn weather, so this preparation in early summer sets up the autumn surge. Harvest in late October or November after hard frosts have killed the foliage. The main taproot goes to your kitchen. Side root cuttings, pencil-sized pieces called sets, are saved and replanted vertically for next year's crop. Annual yield: roughly 2 to 4 pounds of thick taproot. Productive lifespan: indefinite with annual offset replanting. Fertilizer tip. Use a formula high in potassium and phosphorus but low in nitrogen, something like a May 10 ratio. Excess nitrogen drives lush foliage at the expense of root development, which is the opposite of what you want. Crop number 9, wasabi. Most of the wasabi served at sushi restaurants in the United States isn't real wasabi at all. It's horseradish, mustard, and green food dye. Authentic wasabi rhizome is one of the most expensive food crops in the world, and it's actually possible to grow it at home. Wasabi is a semi-aquatic, highly specialized perennial crucifer native to cool, heavily shaded mountain stream beds in Japan. It takes 18 to 24 months to reach maturity. When it does, you pull the entire plant to harvest the primary rhizome, typically 4 to 6 inches long. The offsets and plantlets forming around the crown are separated and replanted, continuing the propagation cycle indefinitely. This crop demands respect because its requirements can't be compromised. Temperature. Wasabi thrives in a narrow band of 45 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Air temperatures exceeding 77 degrees Fahrenheit trigger immediate heat stress and disease. In most of the continental United States, that means summer management is the real challenge. Keeping the plant cool through shade cloth, evaporative cooling, and strategic placement. Light. 75 to 90% light exclusion. This is a forest understory plant. It needs deep shade, not partial shade. Water. The potting mix must be kept constantly wet, but never stagnant. The most effective home cultivation strategy is setting the pot in a shallow tray of fresh water that's flushed and replaced daily, similar to the Watercress management system. Container. 3 to 5 gallons, 10 to 12 inches deep. Air pruning fabric pots or slotted plastic containers provide the root oxygenation necessary to mimic flowing stream conditions. Substrate should be a loose, highly organic mix of premium peat or coir combined with 30% coarse sand and gravel. Hardy in zones 8 through 10 outdoors. In colder regions, containers move indoors to a basement or climate-controlled space over winter. 2 years of patience. A harvest that most restaurants in America cannot afford to source authentically. That's what growing your own wasabi delivers. Crop number 10, Good King Henry. This is the crop I promised you at the beginning, the one most people have never heard of, and it might be the most productive perennial green vegetable available to American container gardeners. Good King Henry, also called Lincolnshire spinach or brave Hendrick, is an ancient herbaceous perennial in the amaranth family, native to Central and Southern Europe. It has been cultivated for centuries as a highly nutritious alternative to spinach, and it has a productive container lifespan of 15 to 20 years. Let that number sit for a moment. 20 years of harvests from a single 5-gallon container. The plant is exceptionally winter hardy, surviving temperatures down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit across USDA zones 3 through 9. Foliage dies back in winter and reemerges very early in spring, earlier than almost anything else in the garden. And here's the dual harvest that makes it exceptional. Each spring, the emerging shoots can be earthed up, covered with compost or straw to blanch them in darkness. These blanched spring shoots emerge pale and tender, known historically as poor man's asparagus. From late spring through summer and into autumn, you harvest the succulent triangular leaves continuously. Cutting the plant back in midsummer stimulates a fresh flush of tender autumn leaves. Annual yield, roughly 1 to 3 pounds of greens per container. And it is notably free of serious pest and disease problems, one of the lowest maintenance crops on this entire list. One critical rule for establishment success: do not harvest anything in the first year. The plant needs that entire first season to develop the fleshy perennial rootstock that powers 2 decades of production. Harvest too early and you compromise the root system permanently. Seeds germinate slowly and erratically, 14 to 28 days, and require 2 to 4 weeks of cold stratification in a refrigerator to break dormancy. Plan for this when sourcing or buy established starts from a specialized nursery. One note on food safety. Raw leaves contain oxalic acid and should be cooked before eating. Blanched shoots and cooked leaves are completely safe and highly nutritious. Container requirement: minimum 5 gallons, 12 inches deep. Substrate should be heavily enriched with composted manure. This plant evolved in nitrogen-dense soils near livestock and thrives in high fertility conditions. 15 to 20 years. 1 container. The most productive long-term green on this list. Now that you know all 10 crops, let's talk about the 4 mistakes that kill perennial container systems. Because getting the crop selection right is only half the equation. Mistake 1. Using garden soil in your containers. Standard garden soil contains fine silt and clay particles that pack together under repeated watering inside the smooth walls of a pot. Within a season, that compaction eliminates oxygen pores, creates waterlogging, and breeds the soil-borne pathogens that rot perennial root systems. Always use high-quality soilless potting mix. No exceptions. Mistake 2. Shallow, frequent watering. Shallow watering keeps moisture at the soil surface and encourages weak, surface-level root systems. Water deeply until liquid drains from the bottom drainage holes. Then let the soil dry slightly before watering again. And never let pots sit in full drainage saucers for more than 30 minutes. Saturated drainage blocks oxygen diffusion and triggers root rot within days. Mistake 3. Over-fertilizing with high-nitrogen synthetic feeds. Excess nitrogen drives rapid, succulent vegetative growth that lacks structural stability, making foliage vulnerable to dehydration, wind damage, and aphid colonization. Synthetic fertilizers also leave salt residues that accumulate in the potting mix over time, burning root tips and causing leaf margin necrosis. Feed every 4 to 6 weeks during the growing season with balanced organic liquid fertilizers, diluted fish emulsion, and kelp meal at half strength. Flush the pot with clean water periodically to clear accumulated salts. Mistake 4. Preventing winter dormancy. Some growers try to keep cold-hardy perennials like horseradish, sunchokes, and good King Henry actively growing indoors through winter. This weakens them. Temperate perennials require a distinct dormancy period triggered by cold temperatures to rest and reset their growth cycle. Prevent dormancy and you get weak, leggy growth, increased pest susceptibility, and declining productivity. Let them go dormant in a cold, protected environment. An unheated garage or shed is ideal, and they come back stronger every spring. 2 things most container gardening videos completely skip, and both matter significantly for urban growers. Balcony weight limits. Under standard U.S. building code guidance, residential balconies and elevated decks are typically engineered for a minimum live load of around 60 pounds per square foot, with some modern structures rated up to 100. Here's why this matters for perennial containers. Wet soil is heavy. A standard soilless potting mix that weighs 8 to 10 pounds per cubic foot when dry can weigh 45 to 50 pounds per cubic foot when fully saturated. A single 15-gallon container filled with wet soil, drainage material, and a mature perennial plant can weigh between 80 and 120 pounds. That adds up fast once you're placing multiple large containers along a balcony. Clustered pots along the outer railing create concentrated point loads that can stress structural joints on older buildings. 3 practical rules. Use lightweight soilless mixes, peat, coconut coir, vermiculite, instead of any soil containing sand, clay, or gravel. Substitute perlite for gravel drainage layers. And place heavy containers against the inner structural wall of the balcony, not along the unsupported outer edge. Sourcing perennial vegetables. You won't find most of these crops at a big box garden center. These are specialized crops that require specialized nurseries. 4C kale, horseradish, and sunchokes. Look for vegetatively propagated bare root divisions from specialty perennial nurseries and seed companies. These clones bypass the slow and erratic germination associated with wild seed and arrive certified disease-free. For good King Henry, French sorrel, and Perennial Arugula, seed is widely available through specialized seed exchanges. Just remember, good King Henry and sea kale seeds require 4 to 9 weeks of cold stratification in a refrigerator before they'll germinate. Let me pull this together. 10 crops. 1 planting. Years of harvest. That's the promise of this video. Plant once, harvest for years, and every single crop we just covered delivers on it. A few of these are worth remembering above all. Good King Henry, producing for 15 to 20 years out of a single 5-gallon pot, with almost zero pest pressure. Sea kale, a 15-year container investment that pays back in rare, blanched spring shoots. And wasabi, the most premium harvest any home container garden can produce, if you're willing to be patient for 2 years. The rest of the list rounds it out perfectly. Quick, compact greens like Egyptian walking onions, and perennial arugula for any small space. Purple tree collards for a decade of monthly harvests. French sorrel for a chef-grade lemony green. Watercress for a 30-day start from a grocery bunch. And sunchokes and horseradish for serious underground yield that improves every winter. The system works because these plants build permanent underground energy reserves that grow stronger every year. Your second harvest is better than your first. Your fifth is better than your second. That's the compounding return that annual gardening never delivers. But here's the question this video didn't answer. How do you set up each of these containers correctly from day one? The right soil mix ratio, the right drainage setup, the right fertilizer program, so that you actually hit those yield numbers and lifespan figures instead of losing plants in year 1 or 2. Because the right crop in the wrong container setup still fails. And the details matter more for perennials than they do for annuals, because a mistake in year 1 follows the plant for the next decade. That's exactly what the next video covers. The complete container setup guide for every crop on this list, substrate by substrate, drainage layer by drainage layer. If you're serious about building a perennial container system that lasts, that's the video you need next.